To make our first API call, we'll need to review the documentation for reference. Go to shopify.dev, then documentation, then API and references. Next, we'll be using the admin API. Scroll down and click on REST admin API. The API endpoints are broken out into different parts of the store. For this tutorial, we're going to be using the product endpoint, and then click product below. Here, you'll have all the endpoints related to the product resources. And here you'll have a list of available parameters. We'll touch more on these in a bit. In order to make our first call, we'll need to get the credentials. Go to apps, then click on app and sales channel settings. Click on develop app. Next, click on create app. It'll ask you to name the app, which we'll call shop app test. Click save. From here, click on API credentials. Now click on configure admin API scope. On this screen, we want to select all of the read options, and that is because for this test, we won't be sending any data into Shopify. We'll only be using get calls to retrieve existing data from Shopify. Now, once you're done selecting all the read options, you'll see the latest version here. Yours might be different, but it'll work just fine. So now just hit save. Now, up top, click on API credentials and click on install app. Now that the app has been installed, you'll get access to your API keys. But before we can use them, we'll need to set up another file. Go to your code editor. Here, I already have it created, but go ahead and make a shop_creds.json file and fill it out with these variables the way you see here, and we'll copy and paste our values into here. Go ahead and copy your API key and paste it in here, and we'll do the same for your API secret and your API token. Okay, now that we have our API credentials, we'll begin to make our first call. Create another file and call it shoptestapi.py. This is where we'll write our script. We'll start by importing request and JSON. This is how we'll make the API call and read the response. Next, create a variable called shopcreds. This will be the same name as your shopcreds JSON file. Just make sure that the Python file and JSON file are in the same folder, or you'll need to add the full path here for it to work. Next, we'll need to open this file and make the creds accessible, so we can do that with the open function. And we'll assign it back to shopcreds. Next, we'll create a variable called domain, and this is where your admin store URL name will go. Here you can see my store name is Half Read Books. And then the Shopify URL, which is myshopify.com. Next, we'll create a variable for our endpoint. Now go back to the Shopify API docs, and we'll be using the retrieve products endpoint. So go ahead and copy it from the front slash to the question mark. This endpoint allows us to retrieve all the product information. Other endpoints will only give you access to a portion of the product information. Paste the endpoint into the variable. Next, we'll create a products field variable. This is for the parameters. We'll revisit this in the end, but for now, we're gonna set a limit to fetch only the first two products. Now we can create the full URL where we make the request call. We'll call it base_URL, and that will equal domain plus endpoint plus product fields. Now we need to create the header variable for the request call. This will be a dictionary, and the first key will be content type, and the value will be application/JSON. The next key will be X Shopify access token. And the value will be our shopcreds, and since shopcreds is currently in a dictionary, we'll need to add API token as the key. Next, we'll create a getProduct variable, and this is where we will make the API call. We'll build the request as get and then base URL and headers equals header values. At this stage, we're going to test that everything worked. We'll print out the response of the request and hopefully get a 200 response, which means it worked. Now we'll run this file in terminal. And there it is, response 200, so we're good to go. We'll get rid of this print statement. We'll create a products variable, and this is where we'll store the body of the response so we can access the product information. So now if we just print the response, it shows us all the product information, but it's hard to read. To make things easier to read, I'll add a library from pprint import pprint, and this will clean up the output. And now instead of doing print, we'll do pprint. Now we'll run this in the terminal again, and there we go. Much easier to read. I'll make this window bigger. Now, the response is a dictionary where products is the key and the value is a list of the actual products. So we'll need to pass the product key whenever we want to access the actual list of products in the response. So now that everything is working as expected, we'll delete this. We'll create a loop to access each product in the list. And here we pass the product as a key since the product list is in a dictionary. And now we'll pprint product. And we'll add an empty print statement to create separation when we look at the terminal response. Now we run this in the terminal, and there it is. We now have access to each product. Here you can see the body HTML, when it was created, the product ID. But sometimes you don't want all this information. You only want a few data points back from each product. So now we can go back to the product fields variable. We'll add a ampersand fields equals. And if we go back to the API docs, we can see all the available parameters for this endpoint. We can now pick which fields we want to include in our API call. We're going to go with ID, title, and tags. And now we run this in terminal. And there it is. We only have to work with the fields that we chose. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, just leave a comment.